This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, real MVPs? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for another edition of the Primetime Podcast right here on Most Valuable Podcast, where we talk about everything that has happened in the college sports world. Let's be honest, mainly football and basketball. We are in full football mode, though, Brandon. And yet again, another good week of college football. We had news from the Fighting Irish. I was almost completely right about the Oregon-Stanford game. But in the end, I think I was right because Stanford usually picks it up at the end. And they played a terrible first half, which just seems like the status quo for the Cardinal. Don't show up early, show up late, and then win the game. And what an upset for Old Dominion as they went ahead and beat the Hokies. Hokies now looking dismantled. Quarterback out indefinitely. They also had another player on the defensive side that they had to let go from the school, I believe. Hokies not looking too well.
And this is where Ricky starts to slowly backtrack from being a fan of Virginia Tech.
No,
They're not
still
good
a
anymore.
fan.
They're not in the top 25.
I'm still a fan.
I think I'm going to slowly walk away from them and find someone else to like this season.
It's not like I can backtrack to the Illini.
That's what he does. That's what he does.
It's not like I can backtrack to the Illini. I mean, they gave me hope in that first half against Penn State. But yet
That's what
again,
they'll do.
Penn State's another team. Plays shitty in the first half, picks it up in the second half, and wins that game. But we got a jam-packed show for you guys. We're going to be previewing two games this week, talking about Stanford, Notre Dame, a big game coming up this upcoming weekend. Going to also be looking at Notre Dame. Could they have found the answer at quarterback in Ian Book? We're also going to be taking a look at our first Big Ten, top 10 matchup, I believe, with the Penn State Nittany Lions playing host to the Ohio State Buckeyes. I almost said Buccaneers. Buccaneers playing tonight. I got NFL on the mind too, but the Buckeyes, we're going to talk about how the Nittany Lions can upset Ohio State, and then we're going to look at some college first-year coaches and see who is in the most trouble before ending the podcast, making our picks. But before we get into everything, a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast if you want to help support the channel. That link down below in the description. Also, make sure if you want to help support us, get yourself an MVP t-shirt. That link is also down below in the description, or you can catch it at mostvaluablepodcasts.com, where you can also catch MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, make sure to go on to iTunes. And Brandon, you know what time it is on the PTP. It's that time where I pull out my phone and I look at our podcast app, or my podcast app on iTunes, and I see if we only have that one rating. Well, several ratings, but only that one comment, and I believe it is still the only one. All SEC, don't bother. And if you look at the topics today, no SEC team at all. We got Pac-12, we got Independent, we got Big Ten. We're not talking SEC at all. So, yet again, proving we're not a couple of good old boys and just talk about the SEC. But if you want to help us right that ship, please, literally, right that ship. Write down your review of the Primetime Podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. It would really mean the world to us. And if you could please give us that 5-star rating. But, Brandon, let's jump into this first topic. We've got a big top 25 matchup between Notre Dame and Stanford going on this upcoming weekend. But the thing I want to look at coming in is, of course, Stanford. They barely escaped the Ducks in Eugene this past weekend. But when it comes to the Fighting Irish, it looks like they have maybe found their answer at quarterback. Brandon Wimbush before the game benched by Brian Kelly. Ian Book comes in, 2 touchdowns through the air, 3 touchdowns on the ground, 325 yards of passing. I am going to ask you the plain and simple question: have the Irish found their answer with Ian Book?
Well, if you go by what he did this past weekend, I think that you could definitely say that they have. And again, I actually do want to say that Wake Forest was one of those teams that I was kind of looking at them and thinking, okay, could they kind of be similar to what a lot of people thought Vanderbilt could be?
Kind of like a sneaky upset?
With Vandy, some people picking Vandy for the upset there. I was thinking the same type of thing with Wake Forest, as Notre Dame wasn't at home. They were going into Wake Forest. That could be something there. It clearly was not, as Notre Dame won that one pretty handily. But what really felt good for this Notre Dame team is the offense. It felt smooth. It for the first time this season, it felt smooth, and that was because of the quarterback play from Ian Book, and it just hadn't felt that way throughout the season with Brandon Wimbush. And maybe that's because Wimbush really hadn't looked comfortable for the most part. He played well, well enough in the first game against Michigan, but every game after that, he really just didn't look extremely comfortable. His numbers didn't look great. He was very inaccurate. He was not efficient, and he really just, at the end of the day, he wasn't effective. So you bring in Ian Book, and you don't even do one of those, midway through the quarter, midway through the game. You just bench Wimbush before the game starts. You bring Book in, and you give him the entire game with no kind of thought of, hey, Wimbush could be coming in behind you. No, it's yours for the taking. And that's exactly what he did. He took those reins, and he did a great job. He played really well. His reads were good. He was very effective. He was great on the ground as well, too. And I think, a lot of people, I would probably include myself in there, I looked at Brandon Wimbush, especially last season. I looked at him as, this guy is a kind of a do it all quarterback. He can pass, he can run. Again, I think more comfortable as a runner. He's kind of one of those runners where they're a dual threat quarterback, but they would rather be a runner than they would be a quarterback. Where I think is with Ian Book, he seems more comfortable as a quarterback, but can run. And that's, I think, where you're going to get probably the most success, is that someone who is the most comfortable being a quarterback, but is also really effective running the football. And that's what Ian Book showed last week, and I think is a big reason why Notre Dame certainly has a fighting chance this weekend against Stanford.
Well, and for me, I'm on the side of looking at this, the big thing we talked about since week one with Notre Dame, because we talked after week one, and I believe Matt was on that segment. We looked at the Michigan-Notre Dame game, and our biggest takeaway after the first time seeing Notre Dame was, holy crap, they have a defense. This defense looks for real. Michigan, they only give up 17 points. Ball State, I know it was a little bit closer than most people wanted, 16 points given up on defense. Vanderbilt, only 17 points given up. And then this weekend, they gave up their most, but 27, I would say 24 to 27, maybe even 28 is reasonable to give your team the win. Anything over 28, over 27, your offense better come to play, because it's going to be a barn burner in that game, and it's going to be a high-scoring one. The one thing Notre Dame hasn't had is, like you mentioned, an offense that has clicked. 24 points, 22 points have been the only totals they have had before this one. And I know some people will say, but Ricky, but Brandon, it's only one game. It's only one game. Don't expect Ian Book, I keep wanting to call him Ian Book, to come out next game and put 56 up on a team. It's just not going to happen. It might not be 56, but this Fighting Irish offense looked, like you said, a lot more smoother. It looked a lot more relaxed, too. Looked relaxed, looked smoother, looked like an offense that could put 35 up on you and have no problem. And that, to me, for Notre Dame, is why I think they have found the answer in Ian Book. They just needed a guy. They don't need a guy to go out there and be the next Tom Brady. They don't need a guy to be Tim Tebow out there. They need a guy that is just going to make the offense consistent, put points up on the board, because the one thing they know for sure is that their defense is good enough to stifle teams. And the thing I liked most about Wake Forest, about this kind of game with Ian Book, is the first quarter, it ended 7-3, but I take a look at that and I go, all right, that's Book's first quarter this season. Of course you're not expecting him to put up a ton of points. After that first quarter, 21 points in the second, then goes into halftime with a halftime adjustment, puts up 20 more points in the third, and now he's probably going to get a full week of reps to prepare for Stanford. And the one thing, Brandon, I said last week about Stanford, and it almost bit him in the butt this week against Oregon, is yet again, How many first quarter points did Stanford have? Big old goose egg. How many first half points did they have against Oregon? Only 7. This, with Ian Book, this could be another game where me, looking at it this week, Notre Dame could be up 28-7 going into the half, much like Oregon was this past weekend in Eugene.
They could be, and I think that what Stanford showed this past weekend as well is, while yes, they did win the football game, and that was good for them, their defense did not look good early in that game either. So they weren't scoring a whole lot of points, but the defense was giving up a lot. And I think that kind of spoke to what we talked about last week as well when we talked about the Cardinal, is the fact that their defense this season is not like the defenses that they've had in the past. It's not that really dominant force. It's kind of a shaky unit. While, yes, they did come up with a huge fumble towards the end of that football game and for a score, which was big. I mean, big time big. But earlier in the game, they were not getting it done. And if you have a quarterback come in like an Ian Book, and Notre Dame, again, is playing at home, you've got, well, I know that the game was in Eugene this past week too, and Stanford had the stunner there. But Ian Book, a guy that played so well this past weekend, and he showed that he can really kind of carve up a defense with his legs, with his arm. That doesn't bode well for a defense like Stanford's. It doesn't bode well for a team that's, giving up a lot of yards passing. I mean, they're giving up 264 yards passing per game. Now, whereas on the other side for Notre Dame, they're allowing about 140 rushing yards per game. So this could be one of those games where Bryce Love is licking his chops and saying, okay, I'm ready for a big game. He was held under 100 yards again this past weekend, even though he did get a touchdown. So that's where I'm kind of interested to see what happens this weekend, where Stanford will, while you said Book is going to get the reps, Stanford has plenty of time to game plan for Ian Book. And pretty much they're only going to be able to go by this past game. He played he had 3 passes in the game, in the Vanderbilt game, 13 yards and a touchdown. But they haven't seen a whole lot of him. So I'm going to say that the advantage is going to go a little bit more in favor of Notre Dame, because Stanford, it's not like they're going against Wimbush, where they've had a number of games to look at him and see what he's done and see what he did last year and all this type of stuff. They don't have that much history for Ian Book, not significant stuff. So that's where there might be a little advantage here for Notre Dame. But if Notre Dame looks at how Oregon was playing against Stanford in that first half, and they're able to recreate that, they could go up big on the Cardinal, and this defense that Notre Dame has might just be good enough to make sure that Notre Dame keeps them in the rearview mirror.
Well, and the thing I find funny is, in going back to last year as well, the only games where Book had the majority of reps. So, like, in the North Carolina game last year, which was October 7th, he was the only quarterback that played. Started that game. The Fighting Irish won 33-10. I know what you're saying, Ricky. That was a Tar Heel team that was 1-5 after that game. Then in the bowl game, the Citrus Bowl, he had the majority of the pass attempts in the game against LSU. They won that game 21-17. So in games where he's had the majority of reps the last 2 years, Ian Book is a perfect 3-0 on the season or on the career when he's had that. And for me, I think the big question, like you said, with Stanford is Bryce Love. It's, if Stanford offensively wants to get something going, are we going to see the Bryce Love that we saw last year, where Bryce Love was a guy, he wasn't going to, there were some games where it's like, oh yeah, you get like 263 yards but only 1 touchdown, but there were other games where it was like the Arizona State game, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. The Washington game where, he only had half that yardage, but he hit 3 touchdowns in that game. So far this year, we haven't seen that from Bryce Love. He came out, only 29 yards against San Diego State, no touchdowns. 136 yards against USC, 1 touchdown. Didn't play the UC Davis game because of injury, and then he comes out against Oregon, and yes, you could say maybe still feeling some effects from that injury might be why he wasn't Bryce Lovey. But in this game, does Stanford need Bryce Love to be the Bryce Love of last year in order to beat the Irish?
No, they don't. And I think that the reason I say that is because I've really liked what I've seen from KJ Costello. I've got a lot of confidence in KJ Costello after what he did last weekend. I mean, certainly coming into the game, he had good numbers, 7 TDs to 3 interceptions. Now make that 10 TDs to 3 interceptions. And now J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, his number 1 receiver, already has 7 touchdown receptions on the season. He has 7 of the 10 touchdown receptions. An absolute go-to target for him, has been really effective. That combination has been really nice to see. That's going to be one thing. Are they going to be able to duplicate that success that they had last weekend against Oregon, this weekend against Notre Dame, a better defense for sure?
Yeah, and one of the things I worry about, and this with Stanford, is obviously I picked against Stanford last week. Maybe you could say I'm feeling a little salty because Stanford squeaked out with the win. I wouldn't be as salty if Stanford just went into Eugene and just wiped the floor with the Ducks. The fact that the Ducks had that game and basically choked that game away. Yes, Stanford, I want to give them credit for, of course, Costello making the play in overtime, but the Ducks did kind of quack or choke that game away as well. The thing I look at, and this is defensively points against. Yes, the Oregon game is the only road game so far, but when you look at the road-home split when it comes to points against, they're giving up an average of, let's say, like 7 points at home, 31 now on the road. This game ain't going to be in California. This game is going to be in Indiana, in South Bend, which to me, that leans heavily into the Fighting Irish and what they're allowed to do. And also, you look at it, you might be saying, Ricky, but this defense let 27 points up on the board to Wake Forest. Let's be completely honest, though. Really, in my mind, I'm looking at this defense going, they only let up 14 to Wake Forest. Because to me, I look at the touchdown at the end of the third and the touchdown with 4:57 to go. Some people may say points on the board are points on the board. I look at that as this Fighting Irish team was already up 49-13. They weren't playing with the same intensity as they would have if it was like a 13-14 game and they needed a stop or else they were going to lose. So part of me looks at the late 2 touchdowns in the second half for Wake Forest and kind of like how people look at garbage time touchdowns in blowouts. That's what I look like for them. And I just worry that the Stanford offense is going to run into a buzzsaw defensively. And then my worry again, that I had the worry going into Oregon, I'm going to have that same worry for Stanford going into this one, that offense doesn't get going. Has only 7 first-half points. And Notre Dame puts up 28. And then they go into halftime, make the adjustments, and the thing that I worry about with this one is that the Irish won't have that slip-up that Oregon did coming out of halftime.
Well, I think that both of these teams, they're putting up about the same amount of points. I think Stanford's putting about 29, and Notre Dame's putting up about 31 or so. So what that says to me is that this is going to be a pretty close game. I don't think that there's going to be one of these two teams that comes out and just absolutely goes way out in front. I think that we're going to see a pretty tight game throughout.
The thing I'm going to add is, do you put a grain of salt with that now with Ian Book at quarterback? And because Brandon Wimbush was the quarterback for the first 3 games, would that points per game be more if Book was starting the first 3 games? I know we'll never know, but
I can't answer that question.
like, do you put a little grain of salt there that
not really.
Maybe the offense is going to score more?
Not really, because we've only seen one game, and then that would, if we put a grain of salt with it, we would be saying, oh yeah, well, we assumed that they would have scored more. Well, we can't make that assumption because we don't know. It was one really good game for me in Book, and I would expect that we are seeing similar things moving forward. But I still can't 100% say that. Oh yeah, the points per game would have been a whole lot more if Ian Book would have been in there at quarterback. But that's why I do think that. I mean, this is a 7-8 game. It's going to be a really good contest. Notre Dame's favored right now by I think 4.5. Is the line. So I'm looking for a great ball game.
See, I'm on the other side where
You're not looking for a great ball game?
No, not that. The point you made before with me, I am putting a grain of salt with it, because the thing is, I know we can't go into our time machine and see what it would be like, or open up the Rick and Morty multiverse portal and go into a universe where Ian Book started the beginning of the year for Notre Dame. But the thing I already know is I've seen what this offense can do. Yes, it's only one game, but I've seen what it could do with Ian Book, and talking to people I know, friends I know who are Notre Dame fans. And the one thing that has been consistent with them is why did it take Brian Kelly this long to pull the trigger? Why did it take him this long to pull the trigger on the quarterback? Am I expecting a 56-27 blowout in this one? No. But I'm expecting a game where it might not be as close as some people think. It might have some good moments, but it might be one of those good games where one team is trailing the entire way, and it's only good because, they're chipping back. It's like the commercial with the guy with the fishing line, where it's like, they're getting close. Ooh, got to be quicker than that to get this lead. Ooh, you got to be quicker than that. And I'm looking at this game, and like, if I'm putting a point total to it, I wouldn't be surprised if this would be like I'll say 38-24 Notre Dame victory, where Notre Dame's defense puts up more points, offense looks really good. Stanford comes out slow, only puts up 7 first half points, then puts up 21 points in the second half. But the Notre Dame offense got going early, and the defense held Stanford down when that offense finally started clicking.
I mean, I could see you being right on that. I think the lone worry I have for Stanford is their defense and how they'd be able to hold up, because yes, they were down, what was it, 21-3 early in the first half. They were down 21-3, and I'm going to put it more as the
24-7 at half.
24-7. Okay, 24-7 at halftime. So I'm going to put it more as Oregon took the foot off the brake, took the foot off the gas, and just started to slow up. And not necessarily that the Stanford defense really held them. And now the Stanford fans can blow up on me and lay into me for that one. But I think Oregon, they just kind of eased up a little bit. They seemed to really ease up. And I think that Stanford, yes, while the defense did, I know, make a big play at the end, and of course they had a good stand in overtime, it's the offense that won that game for Stanford, and it's the lack of offense at the end by Oregon that lost them that.
Well, this is where you guys come in. We will save our pick part for the pick segment. So if you're on YouTube, go check that one out. It's probably up already. If you're listening on podcast services around the world, listen right on through. We'll make our picks at the end of the podcast, so we'll leave off who we have winning this one until the end. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section. What do you think of Ian Book for the Fighting Irish coming into this one? And then really, what do you think about with this game? What do you like about Stanford? What do you like about Notre Dame? What do you don't like about each team? How do you see this game going? Like Brandon said, 7-8 should be an overall good game of 2 top 25 teams this week in college football. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section.